Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am excited for today to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here is a quote just for this episode. It always seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela. Our guest today, a leader in their industry, a mentor to many, a friend, a great friend to the Culture Matters podcast. If you listen with regularity, you know them. If you don't, I challenge you, go find them on our show. Founder of EPM, creator of Tag, the American Gift, the one and only Eddy Perez Jr. is back. We're talking about 2024 and looking straight ahead. We're recording this on a Sunday. As you can see, as you're watching on YouTube, Jay Duran on YouTube, it's dark out. It's raining in two different states, but we're making it happen well before the sun is up. So thank you for coming back, Eddy, and making this happen as
My pleasure.
we have plenty of time left in the year, but there's less than 100 hours, well under 100 hours left. I'd like to know, what does 2024 mean to you? What does 2024 mean to you?
Wow. Oh man. 2024. Well, first off, incredible year. More, self-improvement, more personal growth, more growth of those around me. So a better environment. If I had to sum up 2024, it's just continuous growth in the in our journey of self-improvement.
How do you define or uh, thematize or explain what growth is to somebody that feels stuck, stagnant? Uh, their experience in 2024 might have been the opposite of yours.
Mm-hmm. Growth is when you become as uncomfortable as you humanly possibly can. Because through that uncomfortableness, and it could be reading, writing, having conversations, doing tasks you don't want to do, anything that deals with your career, your personal life, maybe it's relationships you haven't talked in a long time. So the real uncomfortable work, it's when you do it consistently, not once or twice, consistently for an extended period of time, where that allows you to become more self-aware, more improved in everything about your skills, because it's your skills that you work on. Your talents are what you're born with, but it's that growth of your skills through the uncomfortable work that allows you to become a better human in what you categorize as better for yourself. It could be that you want a certain hobby you want to be better at. Maybe it's time with your children. Maybe it's your business. Maybe it's just overall subject matter. Whatever you deem as that's the opportunity that you give yourself through the uncomfortable work to get to that work, that very productive word of growth, because it's not about change, it's about growth. There is a difference.
How have you seen that bring the best or more out of others around you over the last handful of years?
Yeah, I mean, there's been relationships that I have that I never thought would be at the level that they are today. I thought that there was always going to be a push and pull in the relationship and a struggle. And we still have our differences, but that's the diversity of thought that I think is very needed in relationships to have the greatest refinement of any idea and execution. However, I would just say that our bonds and even friendships that you could call it, have just extremely strengthened, because I know their strengths, they know my strengths, and that's all we focus on. Your weaknesses are just a strength gone too far and it's the other side of the coin. It's more about being aware that you're in that weakness zone and just focusing on the strength that got you there.
Did you have a word for 2024 or a
Beginning
mantra
of the
that
year,
expressed? Yeah, for the
yeah,
2024.
2024, I had, action over words.
Action over word.
Words.
What did that mean to you?
I think for the most part, and look, there's probably even neurological data to this and other datas of what I've read. I think people talk too much. And I think they talk to the point that they cause themselves mental health problems a lot of times. It's like, oh, I'm going to lose, 100 pounds in a year. And it's like, are you really? Because how about we set a goal of 5 pounds a month? I'm just using that as an example. I think if people took action first, now you have to have a plan. So you have to reverse engineer whatever your goal is. Like, I want to lose 100 pounds. Okay, I got to lose 0.3 pounds today. What do I need to do? I'm just using that as an example. I think people don't take enough action. I think they want to be heard too much. And the greatest way to be heard is by your results and your actions that you take, not by the words that you display. I think at times people lecture and give too many speeches instead of say, hey, here are the bullet points and here's what we're going to do. That's why I say I think Nike has the greatest slogan ever. Just do it. Do it. That's really what it's telling you to do. So I think that talk is cheap. I think it's in an abundance. I think there's no scarcity of words and talk and grandioso. I think there is a scarcity to the human condition at times when it comes to execution because it's very uncomfortable again. You're going to possibly make mistakes. You're possibly going to look foolish. There's a lot of things that won't go your way. That's why I think life is a lot like baseball. If you go 3 for 10, there's no sport more humbling than that. The only thing more humbling than baseball is life. And I think if you go with that perspective, because if you keep taking action, you're going to get there. You will break through the wall. It's kind of like the movie Shawshank Redemption with the little hammer. And for those that haven't seen it, I'm sorry, I'm going to ruin one of the greatest movies ever. But little by little, took 20 years, but little by little, he got to freedom. Even though he was wrongfully accused to be there anyway. So you could argue he should have had his freedom anyway. Yeah, however, sometimes you're dealt a certain set of cards, no different than Viktor Frankl and many were during World War II. And they use those set of cards in a different way.
I'm gonna make a new sub logo for this podcast is a little hammer.
It would be a very good metaphor, very good representation.
Inspiring. Action over words. Looking back at the year, because our listeners, I challenge them to go back a couple years and listen to your day, your appearances, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think it'd be very inspiring to them to see your evolution. Going back to last year, what would you say? Where would you say you showed up as it relates to action over words? Meaning, do you feel like you embody that at the level that you would have expected, or like crushed it that do you feel good about that, like you literally stepped into that?
Yes, I've stepped into it. I think I could have done a better job. I think I could have been more intense and intentional with it. I have been lately, looking back on it, and I'll reflect a lot over the next week because I have a lot of time to myself the next week to reflect. More than likely, I do believe things happen for a reason. So it came in stages because to get the ability to really cut to the chase, you have to demonstrate that over a period of time because, humans have been conditioned too much to, oh, you need to be heard and seen and validated. And yeah, you do, with yourself, nobody else. You have to live with you, nobody else. You don't live with anybody else but you. And I've definitely done that a lot. I mean, yesterday I had I wouldn't say an epiphany, and you talk about some of the uncomfortable work. I started reading, Beyond Good and Evil and Nietzsche, and some of the very tough subjects for me to try
Wow.
to digest.
Yeah,
Whew,
me
but
too.
I had an epiphany of what I called the 10 commandments of the greatest wastes of time to organizations and individuals.
Uh, I want to ask you about those. I saw that post. And it got clearly something struck a chord because people are commenting like crazy and deep thoughts, not just surface level. Before I ask about that list, reflection, time for reflection. What is the value of that for our listeners? What does
It
it do for
is
you?
to
How would
put,
you?
because I
Yeah.
like to put things in simple terms so people understand it. Reflection is the one time you go over the events that happened and you find the opportunities where you can get a little bit better. Something I learned from our friend Michael Lasso. Meryl Streep is considered one of the greatest actresses ever. And regardless of how many, I think she's won 3 Oscars, she always goes back to her advisor, says, hey, where could I improve a little bit better?
Wow.
I think it's a great time to strategically plan on how to improve yourself. And you can only do that by writing it down, what led to it, taking notes. I'm a big fan of writing down your 5 to 10 wins a day, because then when you read them backwards, you can kind of see how things went. You can also see what you didn't push hard enough when you should have. Because speaking of Nietzsche, he did say something that this helps you with. Instinct is the greatest form of intelligence,
Wow.
and this helps with your instincts. Like you hear people say common sense, wherewithal, know-how. I don't think you can do that without self-reflection. I think that is a true opportunity. Now, the key is, can you be very graceful with yourself where you don't just beat yourself up, because that's not productive either. However, at the same token, hold you to a high standard. So there is a balance to it. There is a balance.
Do you remember where you were when you had this epiphany? Because I'm going to read through these thou shalts.
About the
You
same
weren't
place I am
reading
right
through.
now, getting to the
Oh, yeah.
gym. Getting to the gym, and I was listening to Beyond Good and Evil, and I was rereading the notes
Wow.
of it. And I know the impact he's had on a lot of people. I know how his works were misused by his sister, just some of the poor character assassination that the guy dealt with after his death.
Yep.
And it just came to me. I said, because I've also studied my personality a lot this year to really understand myself even in the next level. And nothing drives me crazier more than wasted time. I mean, I think that's why it's action over words, because there's never an abundance, a shortage of what people are telling me that they're going to do and talk. There's never an abundance of ideas. There is an abundance of execution, because somebody's got to take the ball and run with it. Somebody's going to have to be possibly the person that doesn't win the game, strikes out. So at the gym, it just came to me. I was like, what are the 10 commandments of the greatest wastes of time? It just dawned on me. A lot of that is my experience. I mean, that basically summed up not even just 2024. That could be, I'd say that's a culmination over the last 20 years in my industry, and seeing how my industry was so radically changed because of laws. The only industry that literally compensation is regulated. So many things that it did in the macro of the United States economy, and it moves trillions of dollars, so it's so impactful, just gave me so much advantage, I would say, to the knowledge, the
Oh,
instinct, even in other pockets before it hit certain standards. When I joined a CEO peer group to get out the industry, because I wanted people that didn't know there was a T in mortgage, because they still knew how to lead people, and that was very culture base. That just came to, that was, I'd say, a culmination. I've said a lot of those things like spilled milk. People want to rehash what you did wrong. They never want to rehash what you did right. And then it's like, obviously, number two is the ultimate, beating of dead horses, or overanalyzation of a ham and cheese sandwich. I didn't throw that in there because they're all in the same category. It's like, all right, dude, we get the point. I got you. How do we fix the process in the system? And then better yet, doesn't really matter. It's time to move forward. It's just the problem is, I understand that we're emotional creatures as humans. Um, the challenge is a lot of people judge first, then think, and you got to really, really think hard before you make any judgments or assumptions.
Hey, how do you, if at all, what connection do you think? So I'm gonna read the number two. Well, all right, let me read through the 10 for the audience, and then I'll have a question about number two from this conversation. Number one, or here are 10 commandments for the greatest waste of time to an organization, individual, etc. One, negativity. Two, beating the dead horse on any subject. By the way, funny, sad, like Nietzsche's last like moment. Someone was beating, I don't know if you know this, they were beating
Oh,
a
I didn't know that.
horse.
No, I didn't even know. No,
Oh
I did
my
not know that.
God. Yeah, they were beating a horse and he jumped at them, the horse, and hugged it like right before he kind of lost it. And it was just a really amazing for all the Nietzsche lovers that are listening. It's you'll understand. Or if you're not, then get your ass, clean your room, stand up straight with your shoulders back, and go read some Beyond Good and Evil. But so
It's
number
tough. I'm
three,
not gonna sit here and lie. It's tough, but there is some great epiphany breakthroughs that you can absorb through it.
the number three is talking about spilled milk instead of fixing the process or system. Number four, lack of perspective for the human condition. Study Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Number five, no actions taken on solutions. Number six, talking to feel heard versus get results. Number seven, speeches, aka lectures. Number eight, lack of knowledge for the macro of the industry. Number nine, self-righteous. There are no saints in the room. Number 10, low self-awareness. Now, my question is on number two, beating the dead horse. You talked about 2024 being actions over just words. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
there's a connection between a lack of action as a focus and an overemphasis on words and the beating of the dead horse being a something that can happen? Or is there a connection at all between them?
Well, the connection that I found is, another kind of metaphor. How do you get a dog to starve? Get five people to try to feed them. What I've found is in those subject matters, when you ask people, okay, what's the solution? What's the game plan? What would you do differently? What could your department have done differently? You'll never, ever, even the greatest talkers in the world, shut them up faster than when you ask them that line. So the question is, it's like, beating of the dead horse is almost like agenda breath. Like, I wanted it this way. You didn't listen to me. And it's like, dude, you didn't even take any of the actions. It's real easy to be critical, to sit back and just, it's kind of like the man in the arena. The dead horse to me reminds me a lot of the man in the arena
Okay.
by um, Teddy Roosevelt. It's real easy to critique and bring it on when you're not the one whose face has dust and blood on it and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, well, I think there's too much politicking. I think with beating of the dead horse, you lead to, well, I said it. And it's like, yeah, dude, if I said 20 things to cover a subject, and somewhere in there, I'm going to be accurate because I've basically hit all spheres of it. You just wanted to be politically accurate. You didn't really want to generate results. I mean, I think that's part of the problems in politics. Like, a lot of them really don't want the results. They want the system to stay messed up. And I think a lot of individuals and organizations and people in the organizations want to keep it messed up. Now, the question is, are they aware of that? Is it nefarious? I think a lot of cases, truly, I do believe most people are trying to do the best that they can. They really, really are. They just don't know how to.
Number 8, lack of knowledge for the macro of the industry actually ties to what I wanted to ask you about 2024, which was how about the industry? What's your assessment of your industry in 2024?
My assessment is that, more of the same. I do believe there's a certain degree of delusion that hasn't left, and I'd actually tell you has increased. I had said, for years that I didn't think the Fed Reserve should cut interest rates till Q2 of 25. They cut them early. Now they're talking about raising them back up because inflation didn't get solved. And, inflation's a very basic formula. You can't make the money cheaper and expect it to slow down. And it's not because I'm some genius. I just have studied it, and the answers are very clear. That the challenge is, can you be unemotional about them and try to follow what leads to behavioral economics? And we need some austerity, and that's what they do. And then all of a sudden, interest rates go up, and of course, because inflation's the worst word for it, and then people don't understand. And interest rates can absorb it because we have the greatest supply of buyers with the greatest demand of buyers for the lowest supply of product. So those mythical stories that real estate's not affordable,
Wow.
this isn't, and it's not even accurate, because maybe it's unaffordable for some people, but then other people will figure it out. And I just think there's a certain level of delusion to the industry. I think the great news is that there will be a lot more homes built for the next few years, so that shortage of supply will start catching up. I think there will be pockets of opportunity to refinance. I just think the industry for 21 years, 22 years was so used to, as I call it, falling knives, with interest rates dropping. And, there was something like from 2003 to 2022, something like 8 or 9 certain degree refi booms. I don't think that's very justified. That's essentially churning. And I just think with over 80% of people below 5% and interest rates nowhere near that, I don't really know how mathematically a refi boom can happen. I know that some of the people that are higher, there's a pocket of that, but that pocket's not massive, not like we saw in 2020 and 2021. And I think the industry still hasn't gotten used to it. I think a lot of that's because of the laws that were passed. I think the laws that were passed for, the financial regulation bill changed the culture of the industry very drastically. And I don't think people have really come to that realization, or more importantly, come to that acceptance, because there's so much that you used to be able to have influence on that you do not have any influence on today. It just is what it is.
If I understand correctly, there was just under a 500,000 loan officers in the industry a few years ago, and I think there's about less than 100,000 that have renewed their license for 2025. Is that
I don't even
accurate,
know.
or
I don't know, man.
or
I've seen that number so many times around. I saw that it was less. I saw we went below 100. I don't know, because since a bank doesn't require people to have to take a test, they just have to register. I think literally they register every teller. I don't know the real active number. I think the real question is, and I'm sure the data exists, how many loan officers are closing. What I would say is, how many loan officers are really originators, are full-time, and full-time meaning, I'd say at a minimum 2 loans a month. How many of them are doing at least 25 loans a year? That's the real question.
Where's the opportunity in 2025?
The opportunity for originators is pretty simple. There's a lot more new inventory that's going to show up on the shelves. So what does that new inventory do? Two things. It's going to free up existing inventory. So keep building relationships with realtors, and now start having the courage and do the uncomfortable work to start approaching builders to try to get their business. And I think there'll be a lot of opportunity there. And look, that means that you may be option 2 or 3 with a builder. There's nothing wrong with that, because I've known plenty of people that run that type of business model and get a lot of business. So, it's a very, what I would say, old school market like I joined. And I was only in it a year, but I was in it a year enough to see what was going on versus the era of falling knives, as I call it.
What what are some of the self-sabotaging behaviors that an account executive can fall into in 2025?
Well, it wouldn't just be an account executive. It's any form of an originator. B2C or B2B, an account executive is a B2B originator, somebody that deals with the consumer. An originator is B2C. Doing more of the same. There is this belief that refis are going to come save them, and they're not. I jokingly called them a year and a half ago. The industry had the Paul Revere syndrome. Every 6 months, I keep hearing about the refis are coming. They're not coming. There was a small little pocket in a month last year. Stuff like that'll happen. However, for the greater mass, it's not coming, and it's not going to. It's not mathematically possible, because you've got to study the laws and you got to study history. The only reason interest rates got really low is because they were artificially low. They were, for lack of a better term, on significant amounts of steroids with quantitative easing. And that's not going to come back, because that triggers even more inflation. So when they did it initially, they were trying to trigger inflation. It just took 15, 16 years to get there, but they finally got there. So if anything, you're going to see quantitative tightening like you have been seeing. I think you'll see more of it. I think every time interest rates go a little bit lower, the Fed's going to release more to do quantitative tightening, and it's been published out there. And you have to understand what's driving that and be very honest with yourself. We're going to see an uptick anywhere from 10 to 20% of units. So I consider that a plus. The problem is, it's just not going to be easy. It's going to be simple,
Uptick
but
of
it's not going
more
to be
units.
easy.
Not easy. It's part of that not easy because you said do more of the same thing could be self-sabotage, because I want to make sure I follow this. The refi, right? That infers, okay, I have a relationship with a customer and maybe they do more business with me. If that's not coming, Paul Revere is not coming, I might have to ask for a referral. Like, I might not be able to do direct business with them. I need to be able to ask them for help. I need to be able to ask them for a referral. But that's like, that's a different behavior than just asking for more from them.
Well, it's twofold. That's one of them. The other side of it
Okay.
is that during a refi boom, because what happens is production gets very tight, from a staffing standpoint, nobody can take on as much water as taken on the boat. So what happens is, you hear it all the time. Hey, the first 2 or 3 people you referred to me didn't call me, and I just went with somebody else. So you wind up just absorbing so much business by doing nothing, pretty much, just for being alive. So it's twofold.
Does okay, so can that create entitlement and reactivity?
That's why we're there. That's why I tell people they're delusional. They don't have enough self-responsibility with their actions.
It's like,
That's why
it's like bench pressing 225, but you don't know that the weights are actually, they're not
you're
real
on the Smith
45
machine.
pounds.
Well, no.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, okay,
you're
yeah.
on the Smith machine, and you're not on the straight up, barbell. There is a difference, 30, 40 pound difference. Or to use that as the same metaphor, you get that bench press shirt that you get on that literally
Yes.
pops you another 30 pounds, because it literally tightens your arms up and it gives you literally all your power.
Yes. Okay.
So yes, it's enhanced versus non-enhanced.
Another question I have around specific to the account executive B2B, if in that sense, if their relationships, so uh the originators, they've got to be more proactive. The
Mm-hmm.
account executive then has to be exponentially more proactive because they're going to need more relationships. And can you elaborate on that a bit?
Which part of the
Like
originator?
of
Like
the
the
account
originator having to go out on the street and get more
and how that can
referrals?
impact the account executive and what they need to be doing, in your view,
Well,
to serve them best and as well as bring more to themselves. Because I would think that if there's going to be 20% more units,
it's
but
going to be
not
purchase driven
necessarily
though. It's a different
yeah, so
behavior.
that's
It's going to be
yes,
purchase
yes.
driven. That's a much different behavior. Well, like anything,
So
you
that,
just got
yep,
to know how to
changes.
deliver value. The problem is a lot of people in our industry are glorified rate salesmen, and that can be a whole set of originators. Hey, check out my rate because I'm cheaper. Hey, check out this. Like they don't even know.
Oh yeah.
They wouldn't even know how to answer, an infamous not infamous. It was a great question I used to get asked as an originator. Like when consumers would ask me, should I do a 30 year or a 15 year? And I said, I can't really answer that for you. Like, what do you mean? I said, it's really up to you. Now, what I could do is I can explain the pros and cons and give you both options, and then you decide. I'm not here to tell you which way to do because I'm not in your mind and your behavior. I said, with a 15-year, here's your payment here, it's locked. Yes, you can afford it. If you're not disciplined, like, in other words, you tell me, look, man, unless you make me make that payment and I'm asking you to do that, I'm not going to do it. I said, the real benefit would be to take a 30-year, make the 15-year payment. Not only would you not pay it off in 15 years, you'd pay it off faster. So you actually even save more interest. So then your effective interest rate would be lower. However, if a life situation showed up, you could always go back to the other payment. The other one, come hell or high water, you have to pay it or you're in trouble. And I had a lot of people who said, I appreciate it and I'm going to take it out on my own. Some people followed up with it, some didn't. And I had some people that were very honest going, nah, I hear you and I appreciate the radical candor, but I need the 15-year. A lot of people have no idea how to add that level of value. And what I mean by that is, an AE, and it's not just like, hey, do I have loans? I mean, could you imagine? It's the same philosophy. Originators like, hey, realtors, how can I get more loans out of you? No, how do you deliver value outside of what your core competency is supposed to be anyway? Like, I think what a lot of people don't realize is, like Chris Rock said it, he had friends that would brag about being a good dad, and he's like, there's nothing to brag about. You're supposed to be. You're supposed to deliver great products and great loans. Like there's no, that's not makes you superior. Everybody has pretty much the same products, and a lot of that has to deal with what happened in the financial crash and the regulatory laws that got passed. So it's not like there's all this boutique niche stuff to do. So you can't really product based yourself to be different. The question is, do you go out there? Do you engage with people? Do you meet with people? Do you provide them solutions? Do you understand that maybe there's somebody with credit problems, and how do you advise those realtors to fix those credit problems? Do you also advise even the higher net worth people, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't put as much down? You know, I've even seen where somebody could afford 20% down. However, they were advised to keep their extra 10% because you never know for rainy days, and I do believe in that type of precaution. And then people are like, oh, what about the PMI? I'm always like, look, get over your ego. But what people can do a lot of times is buy it out. Buy out when it's a 90% loan, they could buy out that mortgage insurance. And a lot of that could be from the seller credits or the builder credits that pay for it anyway. So it's all about maximizing. And like anything, when you're providing value, it's a circle. Like if you're going to keep more cash in your bank, you have to understand you may have to pay for some insurance. Like I don't think that's a horrible thing. And I think that's some of the discussions that need to be had out there, because I don't think a lot of probing is being asked of the consumer to really fit their needs and really look at their financial picture. So it's the same way. Like, what value are you providing? Now, if you're just a paycheck to these people, like, oh, I do Zillow marketing with them, I'm like, look, you're probably getting used. You're probably getting used there. So I
You
would say
mean
that
the
like,
originator to the realtor in that context?
yeah, or even, if you're an AE and you're just peddling your products, you're probably going to get used.
So I
How do
wrote
you,
this down like a difference, or that you said rate salesman. Instead of that, I wrote like a relationship resource or a relationship, relationship salesman is less, I don't know, sexy, but like we're moving from the
well, are you
rate
a
to a
relate? Well,
relationship.
it's why I think sales gets a bad reputation, because a lot of salespeople will not peddle what's in the best interest of the consumer because they don't even know. They don't even ask the questions. And there's a big difference between business development versus sales. And I think business development people really focus on the overall picture and, yeah, add value. I mean, it could be so many resources you could have. And sometimes it's even resources at their fingertips from, hey, I've got this insurance guy that can save the most here, because sometimes the debt ratios are that close. Like, they don't have a team with them that offers a complete package. It's just like, hey, I'm just one part. And then they wonder why they get picked off, or they wonder why they went with somebody down the street, because more than likely, and the argument always is, oh, they gave me better terms. And that's not necessarily always true. I think what people also realize is, if you're not fostering the relationship, if you don't foster the relationship with the realtor, if you don't foster the relationship with the builder, if you don't foster constantly in good faith the relationship with your accounts, then they're going to feel used. And there's a good chance they don't send you business, just for that simple reason. Like, it's not going to be like, well, what about my product? What about this? That's such a moving target. Pricing is such a moving target depending on the day in the market. Um, However, like I said, a lot of people are just glorified rate salesmen, and they have been. And here's what I will say: some people are very honest about that with themselves. They say, hey, I don't want to deal with the argument, so I'm willing to make a lot less, but I'll churn more business. And that's completely okay too. So you're following more of the Costco model. That's okay too. My whole point is just be you, which is your own unique. You being an acronym, be who you want to be, and then stay with that plan consistently. Don't try to be a jack of all trades, master to none. Don't be like, oh, on this person, I'm going to do this deal, that deal. It's just too much confusion you're doing to yourself.
Do you have a word for 2025? If you do, what is it? If you don't yet, what could it be?
I'm never usually one for one word. Um,
Or
Even though,
mantra, or
I'm usually one more for a mantra, but I have been toying around that this is the year of hyper focus, really, because it's kind of like what I said to my executives. Like, I really don't care about anything that's outside of your lane at this point. I think a lot of people will change lanes, and I know a lot of times their intention is to try to create results, but the thing is, just like anything that changes lanes, you wind up creating a pileup on the highway, you know. And some people, it is political, it is emotional to try to take their eye off the ball. With other people, they just really, really. It's why I said the lack of self awareness is really, really high. Arguably, it could almost be part of the human condition. However, I thought that one decided in the 10 greatest commandments of wastes of time. I thought that deserved its own category.
what advice would you have for our listeners that have a desire to focus more in 2025?
You have to have a game plan. You have to game plan that you can digest down to daily activities, is what I would tell you. It's kind of like, the year that I decided I wanted to read X amount of books. I figured out I needed at least an hour, hour and a half on Audible. Like, you got to break down the numbers, and I had to take notes on all of them too. So I had to factor in when I would stop, and then I would read the notes to try to get my 1 or 2 points of refinement. If you want to get better at writing, like, you have to break it down to become a daily habit. Behaviors are what change people, and your behaviors of daily habits are what really consistently will move the needle. Because what'll happen is it'll never be like overnight. It'll just feel like overnight. And the cool thing too is, whatever goals you set, if you're following them consistently, you'll kind of start blowing through them faster than you thought, because what happens is you got stronger than when you initially set your goal. So of course you're blowing through them. You're a lot more powerful all of a sudden. So what used to be tough, now all of a sudden you're like, dude, this is a joke. I found more time in my day not to waste and be more productive. And that doesn't mean, take away from your family, don't engage there. It's just be very purposeful with meaning with your time. Time is the only true commodity in this world. You only get so much of it. You never know when your time's going to end, so don't waste it. And I think that's the problem is if people, it's why you've seen, organizations that stay focused that may even have an inferior product do a lot better, because they stick to their core competencies. And the ultimate core competency is not to waste time. If anything, you find a way to cheat time, because you're never going to beat time, but you can cheat time. You know, if you're walking an hour a day, but also taking multiple phone calls, following up with people, or listening to a book, that you're habit stacking. When you habit stack, you can cheat time. It's very crucial to be able to do both. It's very crucial that instead of sitting at your office potentially, but you can take meetings in the car like video you can now, but get home 30 minutes earlier, but you still accomplished all those meetings there and you didn't lose that time because you needed to just sit in your desk. Once again, you were habit stacking, because that was also leaving you more time to engage with your family instead of, oh my God, I got 30 minutes to just ride around and call people randomly. That's just an example that way too.
Nietzsche said, when one has not had a good father, one must create one. You did have a great
Mm-hmm.
father. For those that don't know, who was Eduardo Perez Sr. to you?
Look, man, my idol, my mentor, my confidant, my best friend, my dad. Like, I can't really, words will really never justify what he was to me and what he still is to me, because his spirit, I want to keep his legacy alive. I thought he's the one that paid the ultimate price. I really don't think what I'm doing is hard, because I was born in this country. And oddly, some of the things in my childhood that were obstacles have become significant strength powers today. So I paid a price earlier in life to overcome those obstacles and then hung on, and it didn't derail me. He wasn't, him and my mom and my family weren't. And even a lot of my cousins, like some of the ones that have struggles in this country, weren't born here. So some of that trauma that came here, I am one of the fortunate ones that was on the bottom half of the cousins born. And um, I was born in America, and there's not really a whole lot. And I also think that I was born in Atlanta, which was a huge advantage because, being 100% Cuban, I wasn't born in Miami where you're just another Cuban. I think that afforded me great knowledge of other people's culture, because my parents always said, you better learn everybody else's culture because there's not a whole lot of Cubans in Atlanta. So you will always constantly have to explain who you are, and people will not understand you because they're not used to you. I think that is a significant advantage that gave me a certain perspective and diversity of thought, and really an understanding of quality of opportunity and all walks of life, definitely. So, I think that gave me a certain, discipline, excellence, and intelligence that I think, unfortunately, you have to pay those uncomfortable prices at some point to get. They're just not, they don't just fall from the sky. You know, my father was my ultimate support system. He would tell me when I messed up, but at the same token, he'd be like, all right, dude, you know what you could be doing better. My dad's once said a famous line to me. He's like, oh, son, I wish you wouldn't have to run your head through the brick wall. However, by the grace of God, he gave you a really, really hard head, which is good for you. Um, I think he meant that very endearing, because when he said it to me, some parents would have used whatever the child did as anger, and he used it almost like, oh, son, I wish you wouldn't make those mistakes. Like almost a very endearing, caring. Um, Look, not everybody gets a parent that gave that much of a shit for you. I think a lot of them care. His level of sacrifice for years. We're talking about, He died when I was 31. I've never known a moment he wasn't sacrificing for others. Never, that I can recall. And I recall memories with my dad at 3, 4 years old. Never. Never did I ever see him. And then even at his funeral, so many grown men and women came here crying for, my dad taught me something about don't let your good deeds be seen. I know that they teach you, show it, talk about it. There was just a certain code of life my dad taught me that was a lot about honor, that he says it's okay if they talk about it, but you don't talk about it. So my dad helped out a lot of people financially, even giving them work, when others wouldn't, and just doing a lot of things and not asking for it. But at his funeral, all the confessions came out of what he did. That really resonated with me because it wasn't just leading by example. He really showed the way. I mean, he really demonstrated a certain code and an oath that he ran by, which wasn't easy. It's very easy to eventually get tired of it or get exhausted or think it's never going to end. He just had a lot of gratitude for being in this country. What a lot of people don't realize is, anybody born after 1933 in Cuba did not see freedom. They were first fascist, AKA really the Mussolini model, but people know it more as the Adolf Hitler model, and then the communist model under Fidel, which was AKA more of, Lenin and Stalin, that have led to horrendous atrocities that people don't talk about. My parents really weren't free till they came to this country. And then the irony is my dad had a lot of gratitude because he didn't meet my mom, who 100% Cuban too, and God bless, she's still alive. Also met here. So there's just a certain, it's funny. I dealt with his death. It was really, really hard on me. And for a long time, I'm not gonna lie, I was bitter, pissed off. However, you know, it's those perspectives that really change your life in the macro of any industry, and this one being the macro of life and your relationship with your parents. Well, what gave me a lot of peace is it was my pain to absorb, because the alternative could have been I died first so that I didn't have to go through the pain. I can't even imagine what that would have done to him. So he didn't deserve that. So I deserve this struggle and this pain that I still have every day. I mean, I'd be lying. It's why I encourage people to enjoy their parents. I encourage people like, look, dude, I don't care if you're pissed off with your dad or your mom. You gotta heal that just for the simple sake for yourself. I always talk about self, because self-care, discipline are the greatest gifts you can give yourself, because then everybody around you. Denzel Washington said it best. Want everybody to be selfish. The most selfish thing you can do is improve yourself, because then it becomes selfless, because everything you love and adore around you gets better. Tell people all the time, be selfish, not self-centered. There's a huge difference, significant difference. And ironically, a lot of people that are self-centered don't understand why they're self-centered or what really leads them there. That's more of people that are self-centered. You always learned that they're more disagreeable than most. And that's kind of the darkness that leads to it. No different than people that are more agreeable can lead to resentment. So, um, the key to somebody that's disagreeable is probably to live more of the silver rule life, and that'll help you not become self-centered. And my father and my parents never were. I mean, quite the opposite, but then they had incredible lives, because it's the whole 1+1=3. So yeah, that was my dad, man. I can't really, there's no education, there's no knowledge, there's no bank account, there's no investors, there's nothing that can quantify what he did for me and others. There's just, that is the true. My dad, I would say, was a trillionaire in human spirit.
Final question. What would he what advice would he give you for 2025?
What he would always tell me, my favorite line of his: go out and take what's rightfully yours. Because that's the problem. Most people, it's not going to get given to you. You got to take it. Now, I don't want people misrepresenting my father's word. That doesn't mean steal. That doesn't mean abuse. That just means anything you accomplish in life, you took it. You put in the time, you put in the effort, you brought in the people, you made the mistakes, you took it. Nobody gives you anything. And I would also challenge this to your human spirit. You don't want them to. I firmly believe why you see some people that are super attractive have low self-esteem is because they know they didn't earn it. It was a gift from their parents. That was not skills. You need that. You don't need handouts. They don't solve anything outside of they give you a temporary high of dopamine, but then you feel like trash afterwards. You know, it's a sugar high. Why sugar highs fade off? It's not eating healthy. It's all the same derivatives. He would tell me that. He would always tell me that because he took it too. You know, his story. He had a childhood friend sent to kill him when he was on the Cuban national baseball team, and then he decided to steal a rowboat with 6 others and row to freedom. Nobody gave it to him. He took it. Now, in that one, they'd be like, oh, you stole it. Well, they seized a lot of their assets. I'll
Yeah,
say
it's
that I
kind of
think,
like a war. Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah,
a little
yeah,
different.
that one is like, oh, you seized assets, sent a childhood friend to wrongfully kill me because you thought I was starting a coup when I was actually really, really sick. All right, screw you. And by the way, the people watching the boats are getting drunk anyway and lazy because that's what happens. And that's why we were able to steal it anyway because you weren't even watching. They don't care. They're just patsies. And the irony is it doesn't take a mass amount of evil people to do evil. It just takes a few people and then the rest conform because mentally they say, okay, if I don't do it, I get my brains blown out.
Yep.
So yeah, you got to take it. You have to go out and take what is rightfully yours. Nobody's going to give it to you, nor do you want to. I'm not going to tell you that you may not catch some lucky breaks, but I've always learned that people that are going for it miraculously will catch a lucky break, and it's not really that. They were just prepared for an opportunity. How many unlucky breaks did they catch? Nobody talks about that. How many things didn't go their way? Nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about, oh, they got lucky. I mean, about the only time you really get lucky is if you play the lottery, but there's a reason why those people usually destroy their lives afterwards too. Because once again, they got something they didn't deserve. And the argument could be, yeah, they bought a ticket, they deserved it. Yeah, but the investment versus what got returned so fast. Yeah, I don't know. That's why you see athletes that are young go from being broke to this massive amount of money, and then you're like, what are they thinking? They are not. I just want you to know that they are not. You always feel first, then you either think or take action. And the problem is, if you don't sit there and think before you take action, saying, what are you thinking? They're not. Don't judge them. Like, they really aren't. And that's great advice for teenagers. Like, they're really not thinking. Like, I'm just being honest with you. That's neurological. You have to just understand it. But that's what my father would tell me, to go out and take what's rightfully yours.
If you're listening to this podcast, focus, be proud of yourself, knowing that you executed on what Eddy Perez Jr. shared today. Eddy, thanks for coming back to the Culture Matters podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you. Given my schedule, making the adjustment and all that. And I greatly appreciate it. That just shows your character. And thank you so much.
And we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.